#men who show love without saying, I love you. There are men who never say, I love you, but demonstrate it through every action. Men who lack the courage to confess their feelings yet reveal themselves through their behavior. These are individuals who express the deepest emotions not through grand declarations or poetic words, but through the subtle language of the soul, a language that speaks in silences, gestures, and unconscious choices that betray the heart's true intentions. Why does this happen? Why does someone fall so deeply in love while remaining unaware of it? The answer lies not in conscious decision-making or rational thought processes, but in the mysterious depths of the human psyche. To understand this phenomenon, we must look beyond the surface of human behavior and dive into the rich psychological landscape that Carl Jung so masterfully mapped for us. According to Jung's revolutionary teachings, most emotional decisions stem not from rational thought but from our unconscious mind, that vast, hidden reservoir of human experience that operates beneath the threshold of awareness. This deep mental layer harbors traumas from childhood, desires we dare not acknowledge, fears that shape our every move, and archetypal patterns that connect us to the collective human experience. These unconscious forces direct many of our behaviors, often without our knowledge or consent. When a man falls in love, he may not immediately recognize it, especially if he's been conditioned by society, family, or past experiences to suppress emotions, project unwavering strength, or avoid the vulnerability that love inevitably demands. Cultural expectations often teach men that emotional expression is weakness, that falling deeply in love makes them susceptible to manipulation or pain. In such cases, the unconscious mind becomes the first to recognize and respond to love, expressing itself through seemingly random gestures, pregnant silences, behavioral contradictions, or actions that appear insignificant but actually signal something much deeper and more profound. The unconscious doesn't wait for permission from the rational mind, it acts on its own timeline, following its own logic. While a man's conscious self might be busy constructing defenses, analyzing risks, or maintaining emotional distance, his unconscious has already begun the work of loving. This creates a fascinating psychological phenomenon where the body knows before the mind, where actions speak before words are even formed. How does this hidden love reveal itself? Jung defines the feminine archetype within the masculine unconscious as the anima, representing a man's emotional, intuitive, creative, and empathetic side. This anima often remains dormant or suppressed in men who have been taught to prioritize logic over feeling, strength over sensitivity, independence over interdependence. However, when a man falls in love, his anima awakens from its slumber, and this inner feminine energy begins connecting with the woman he loves, even without his conscious awareness or permission. This awakening process generates observable behaviors if you know what to look for and understand the psychological mechanisms at play. Words become unnecessary, the body speaks its own truth, the soul cries out in its own language. The anima creates a bridge between his inner world and yours, establishing an energetic connection that manifests in countless small but meaningful ways. When a man loves unknowingly, he begins performing small yet profoundly revealing actions that disrupt his normal patterns. He changes his routine without understanding why, disturbs his carefully maintained emotional balance, makes himself uncomfortable in ways he cannot explain. He might find himself taking longer routes just to pass by places that remind him of you, checking his phone more frequently hoping you've reached out, or feeling inexplicably restless when he hasn't heard from you in a while. These behaviors all share one common cause: you have begun to occupy his emotional unconscious. You've taken up residence in that deep psychological space where his most important feelings live, where his soul makes its home. This isn't a conscious choice on his part, it's an unconscious recognition of something significant, something that matters on a level he doesn't yet understand. Jungian psychology suggests that we project onto others what we lack in ourselves, what attracts us, what wounds us, what we unconsciously recognize as missing from our own psychological makeup. A man in love often projects onto a woman the qualities he admires but feels disconnected from within himself: emotional freedom, intuitive wisdom, the ability to feel deeply without shame, or the courage to be vulnerable in relationships. He watches you with an intensity that surprises even him, listens to your words with an attention that goes beyond polite interest, follows your movements and moods often without being aware of his own behavior. This observation isn't calculated or strategic, it's compulsive, driven by something much deeper than surface attraction. He may not understand why you matter so much to him, why your opinions carry such weight, why your presence can shift his entire emotional state. This psychological phenomenon transcends logic. It operates from the realm of the soul, where different rules apply. He may even fear his own feelings when they begin to surface, withdraw from situations that make him feel too vulnerable, become confused by the intensity of his own responses, or act in ways that seem contradictory even to himself. Many men are raised within cultural frameworks that demand they be strong at all times, conceal their deeper emotions, maintain control over their feelings, and avoid falling too deeply in love lest they become vulnerable to hurt or manipulation. These cultural messages create emotional blockages that act like filters, preventing direct emotional expression and forcing feelings to find alternative routes to the surface. Consequently, love emerges not as a direct confession or clear declaration, but as an underground current that expresses itself through seemingly involuntary actions. The fascinating aspect of this phenomenon is that these unconscious expressions often prove more powerful and revealing than words could ever be. A late-night message sent without clear reason, a lingering glance that lasts just a moment too long, the ability to recall a memory you never thought you'd shared with him, sudden unexplained urges to help you solve problems, an instinctive desire to protect you from harm. These all form part of love's unconscious vocabulary. Carl Jung believed that people become psychologically whole when they learn to accept and integrate all aspects of themselves: their rational thinking mind, their emotional feeling nature, their instinctual animal self, and their spiritual aspirations. A man who is unconsciously falling in love is undergoing exactly this process of integration. His unconscious mind already knows the truth of his feelings, his body already responds to your presence, his soul already recognizes the connection, but his rational mind needs time to catch up and accept this new reality. Your role in this delicate psychological process is both simple and profound. Don't force anything, just observe with patience and compassion. Learn to read between the lines of his behavior, listen to what lies beneath his spoken words, because the soul's truth resides in these subtle spaces. Sign 1. The push-pull dynamic. One of the most confusing yet ultimately revealing signs of unconscious love is the emotional pattern that relationship experts call push-pull, that maddening cycle where he withdraws from you but somehow cannot manage to stay away. He might claim to need space, time to think, or distance to figure things out, yet he cannot stop reaching out through texts, calls, or seemingly accidental encounters. He attempts to set boundaries with you and the relationship, but inevitably breaks his own rules whenever he senses you might truly be moving on or pulling away emotionally. This behavior pattern is neither random nor necessarily manipulative, though it can certainly feel that way from the receiving end. Instead, it usually reflects the internal battle raging between his unconscious feelings and his rational mind. When someone feels something profound without conscious recognition or acceptance, a destructive internal duality emerges that plays out through contradictory behaviors. His unconscious emotional side, deeply connected to what Jung called the anima, continuously pulls him toward you, mobilizing his attention, drawing his thoughts back to you repeatedly, making him think of you at unexpected moments throughout the day. This unconscious pull operates outside his conscious control, creating an almost magnetic attraction that he experiences but doesn't fully understand. Meanwhile, his rational ego mind works overtime trying to maintain control over the situation, resisting what it perceives as a threat to his emotional stability, his independence, or his carefully constructed sense of self. This internal conflict between unconscious feeling and conscious resistance creates the erratic behavioral patterns that can drive both of you to distraction. One day he's completely emotionally accessible, warm, present, available, engaged in deep conversation and seemingly ready for greater intimacy. The next day, as if a switch has been flipped, he's distant, cold, evasive, claiming he needs to focus on work, spend time with friends, or just be alone for a while. Yet if you observe his behavior closely over time, you'll notice that he cannot maintain this emotional distance for very long. Something inside him rebels against the separation, and he finds himself reaching out again, often with explanations that don't quite make sense or excuses that seem manufactured after the fact. Carl Jung observed that what remains unconscious appears as fate in one's life, meaning that psychological forces we refuse to acknowledge or integrate will continue to influence our behavior in ways that feel beyond our control. In the context of unconscious love, unrecognized feelings express themselves through contradictory behaviors that seem to operate according to their own mysterious logic. He leaves your presence feeling emotionally overwhelmed, promising himself he'll maintain better boundaries next time, yet finds himself unable to let go of the connection. He falls into silence, determined to prove to himself that he doesn't need the relationship, then discovers himself writing to you before he's even conscious of the decision. He actively avoids situations that might lead to deeper emotional intimacy, yet feels genuine jealousy and possessiveness when he sees you connecting with other people. Why is staying away so psychologically difficult for him? Many men harbor a deep, often unconscious fear of losing themselves in a woman, not because they don't want to experience love, but because they never learned how to remain authentically themselves while also being deeply connected to another person. This fear drives them to distance themselves periodically as a way of reasserting their autonomy and independence. However, when love is genuine and operates from the unconscious level, the psyche doesn't cooperate with these attempts at emotional escape. The unconscious continues pulling him back toward you, maintaining the emotional attachment even as his conscious mind works to sever the bond. What can you do when you recognize this pattern? First, try not to take the withdrawal phases personally. Usually the issue lies not with you or anything you've done, but with his relationship to his own emotional capacity. Second, resist the urge to chase or convince him during his withdrawal phases. When his rational side feels pressured, it tends to become more defensive. Third, pay attention to whether each withdrawal phase ultimately leads to his return. If every period of silence results in an emotionally charged reappearance, if he clearly cannot truly let go of the connection despite his conscious efforts, then you're likely dealing with something deeper than surface attraction, an active, unconscious connection that operates according to its own timeline. Sign 2. Unconscious protection. One of love's purest and most instinctive manifestations appears through the activation of protective instincts. Even without conscious awareness of his feelings, something deep within a man instinctively activates his desire to protect and care for the woman who has captured his unconscious attention. This protection doesn't necessarily manifest through grand heroic gestures or dramatic rescues, but rather through countless small daily actions that reveal how much he values your safety and well-being. You might notice him warning you about being out late in certain neighborhoods, offering his jacket when you haven't even mentioned being cold, unconsciously scanning your surroundings for potential threats when you're together, or expressing concern about situations that you consider perfectly manageable. Often, these protective behaviors emerge without his understanding of his own motivations. He simply feels compelled to ensure your safety and comfort. Carl Jung described archetypes as universal patterns that exist within what he called the collective unconscious, psychological templates that all humans share regardless of culture or individual experience. The protector or guardian represents one of these fundamental archetypes, encompassing not merely physical strength or the ability to fight off danger, but the symbolic protection of what one values most deeply. When a man connects with his anima, that inner feminine archetype representing his emotional, intuitive, and nurturing capacities, his protective instincts naturally awaken. If you're the person who has activated this connection with his inner emotional world, his unconscious will likely respond by wanting to care for you, shield you from harm, and anticipate your needs before you even express them. This unconscious protectiveness manifests in numerous subtle ways. Sometimes it appears as seemingly excessive worry. Text messages checking that you arrived home safely, concerns about your walking alone in areas he considers unsafe, or anxiety about situations that seem disproportionate to actual risks. While these concerns might seem unnecessary from your perspective, they often represent his unconscious mind speaking directly, revealing an emotional bond that he cannot yet verbalize. Other times, protection appears through silent, almost invisible gestures that demonstrate his unconscious prioritization of your well-being. He might consistently position himself between you and busy streets when walking together, automatically carry heavy items without being asked, remember to bring extra layers for you when the weather might change, or subtly steer conversations away from topics he senses might upset you. He becomes your refuge, your source of emotional and physical security, even without any formal relationship commitment or open declarations of love. His unconscious mind has already designated you as someone worth protecting, and most powerfully, this protection stems from genuine desire rather than a sense of obligation or social expectation. However, it's crucial to distinguish between healthy protective instincts and controlling behavior disguised as care. True unconscious protection motivated by love will feel supportive and empowering rather than restrictive or possessive. If his protective gestures are accompanied by excessive jealousy, unreasonable demands, or conditions that limit your freedom, then you're likely dealing with emotional control issues rather than genuine unconscious love.
Almohadilla sign 3. He remembers what you've forgotten.
Perhaps one of the most profound indicators that a man has unconsciously taken you into his heart is his uncanny ability to remember details about you that you yourself have forgotten. Small facts, fleeting expressions, casual gestures, seemingly insignificant situations that meant little to you in the moment but have been permanently etched into his memory. When a man is unconsciously in love, everything associated with you passes through what could be called a special emotional filter, one that automatically prioritizes and preserves information that his soul recognizes as genuinely significant. This process requires no conscious effort, no deliberate note-taking, no strategic memorization. Even without understanding why, you have become anchored in his inner world, and his unconscious mind works continuously to maintain and strengthen that anchor. What kinds of details reveal this unconscious emotional cataloging? Notice whether he remembers the exact dates of conversations that were particularly meaningful, resurrects comments you made weeks or months ago as if you'd just spoken them, knows the specific scent of your perfume without you ever having told him what you wear, or shows awareness of subtle changes in your speech patterns, clothing choices, or general appearance that even close friends might miss. Pay attention to whether he demonstrates genuine interest in people or situations you mentioned only once in passing, recalls stories about your childhood or family that you don't remember sharing, or brings up dreams or aspirations you expressed during casual conversation. Perhaps most tellingly, he might remember the emotional undertones of past interactions, how you felt during certain conversations, what made you laugh or worry, or what topics seemed to make you uncomfortable. None of this emotional retention is coincidental. It indicates that even when his conscious attention might seem scattered, he remains emotionally present and connected to you on a deeper level. His unconscious mind stays completely attuned to your inner world, continuously gathering and preserving information that helps him understand who you truly are. Remarkably, he often doesn't understand his own ability to remember these details. When you ask how he remembers something specific, he might answer with genuine puzzlement, "I don't know, it just came to me." This inability to explain his own memory demonstrates that his unconscious has already completed much of the work of emotional bonding. Jung emphasized that emotions function as psychological anchors, giving weight and permanence to experiences that might otherwise fade from memory. What affects us emotionally becomes engraved in our unconscious far more deeply than we typically realize. When you consistently touch something within him, whether it's an old emotional wound that needs healing, a nostalgic longing for connection, or a hope for meaningful relationship, everything about you becomes emotionally significant and therefore memorable. This is why a man who is unconsciously falling in love develops what seems like supernatural recall about your life, your preferences, your history, and your dreams. Part of his unconscious has already recognized that you belong in his story, that you represent something essential to his psychological growth and emotional fulfillment. Sign 4. Nervous energy in your presence. The human body serves as an honest messenger for the soul, incapable of maintaining the defenses that the conscious mind constructs. While a man might successfully convince himself that he feels nothing special, that you're just a friend, his physical responses will invariably betray the truth of his unconscious feelings. If a man is falling in love unconsciously, his body will speak volumes about the internal transformation taking place. The most obvious manifestation is the way he physically transforms in your presence. His normal demeanor shifts dramatically when you enter his awareness. He might become visibly nervous, fidgeting with objects, adjusting his clothing, or seeming unable to find a comfortable position. His eye contact becomes either intensely focused, staring at you with uncomfortable attention, or completely evasive, as if looking directly at you threatens to reveal too much. You might notice him touching his face repeatedly, running his hands through his hair, crossing and uncrossing his arms, or displaying other forms of physical restlessness that seem out of character. His speech patterns often reflect this internal disruption. He might speak more rapidly than usual, trying to fill uncomfortable silences, or become unusually quiet and withdrawn, weighing every word before speaking. Without clear explanation, his entire nervous system becomes activated in your presence, responding to emotional stimuli that his conscious mind hasn't yet acknowledged. Why does this occur? The body responds directly to unconscious psychological states. When a man hasn't consciously admitted to having strong feelings toward you, but his soul already knows the truth, his body experiences conflicting urges that create visible tension. Part of him wants to move closer, to express the attraction he feels, while another part maintains the psychological distance his ego believes necessary for safety. This internal conflict between approach and avoidance creates anxiety, physical awkwardness, and emotional discomfort, not with you personally, but with the intensity of his own unacknowledged responses. Often, men experiencing this phenomenon don't understand why they feel physically strange around you. They cannot explain why your proximity creates tension, why they become overly serious during light conversations, or why they make inappropriately jovial comments when the situation calls for emotional depth. Remember that authentic love necessarily includes vulnerability, and vulnerability can feel psychologically dangerous to someone who has learned to protect himself from emotional pain. Your presence creates emotional shock to his system. Though the feelings remain unspoken, his heart rate increases when you're near, he becomes hyper-aware of your reactions, and he loses his usual control over social responses. You can often observe what he doesn't notice about himself, the way his voice tone shifts when speaking to you, his unconscious efforts to improve his appearance when he knows he'll see you, his tendency to become unusually serious or hyperactive in your presence, his attempts to fill conversational silences, or his subtle physical restlessness. Finger tapping, neck touching, frequent downward glances. These physical manifestations don't indicate fear of you as a person, but rather fear of what you evoke within him, emotions and vulnerabilities he's not yet ready to acknowledge. The nervous energy represents tension between a soul that has awakened to love and a conscious mind that still tries to maintain emotional safety through distance and control.
Almohadilla sign 5. Hidden jealousy.
Jealousy, when it emerges from authentic emotional connection rather than possessiveness, reveals fundamental truths about feelings before words are ever spoken. When a man is falling in love unconsciously, even while refusing to acknowledge these feelings, his reactions to potential romantic competition will expose what his words never would. He wants you to be his, even if he cannot yet admit this desire openly. We're examining that sudden, involuntary reaction that emerges when another man shows romantic interest in you or when you direct your attention toward someone else. This type of jealousy often remains completely unspoken, yet hangs palpably in the air between you, creating tension that both of you can feel but neither openly acknowledges. Carl Jung argued that the unconscious consistently reveals what the conscious mind fears confronting directly. When a man experiences jealousy without having made any confession of love, it demonstrates that despite his mental denial, some essential part of his soul has already chosen you as uniquely significant. The manifestations of hidden jealousy can be subtle but consistent. He might suddenly grow emotionally cold when another man enters the conversation, his facial expression shifting in ways he doesn't control. He changes his entire demeanor without obvious cause, becoming more serious, withdrawn, or artificially casual in a way that signals internal discomfort. You might notice him making sarcastic jokes about the situation, using humor as a defense mechanism. He withdraws from the interaction entirely, then returns later asking seemingly innocent questions in carefully casual tones designed to gather information about your feelings toward the other person without appearing directly interested. These responses emerge from the recognition that you're touching his soul's most intimate territory. When men haven't consciously admitted their love, they often develop internal defense mechanisms. I don't really care.
Says just a friend. Chicando whatever she wants.
But when you grow genuinely close to another person, when someone else makes you laugh with obvious delight, when another man shows clear romantic interest and you respond positively, those carefully constructed mental barriers begin to crack, revealing the desire beneath the surface denial. How can you recognize silent jealousy? Pay attention to whether he suddenly becomes interested in your relationship history, asking questions that seem casual but probe for information. Notice if he consistently interrupts when you mention other men positively, or changes the subject when you speak admiringly of someone else. Watch for passive-aggressive humor when you discuss other potential romantic interests, or his tendency to make dismissive comments about men who show interest in you. Often, he'll immediately distance himself emotionally after witnessing another man's romantic interest, then return later acting as if nothing happened, but with subtle behavioral changes that suggest the incident affected him more than he admitted. Many men experience this type of jealousy not because they believe you belong to them, but because they fear someone else might recognize your value and pursue you more directly than they feel capable of doing. The fear of loss often precedes any conscious acknowledgement of what might be lost, and within that fear lies the depth of feelings that haven't yet found verbal expression.
Almohadilla, conclusión.
Carl Jung taught us that the most essential psychological transformations always begin in the unconscious realm, operating beneath the surface of awareness long before they emerge into conscious recognition. If this man in your life hasn't yet declared his love through words, yet unconsciously protects you from harm, remembers intimate details about your life that you've forgotten, displays nervous energy in your presence, experiences push-pull dynamics that reveal internal conflict, and harbors unacknowledged jealousy when others show romantic interest, then his soul has already made its decision. He is in love. His conscious mind simply hasn't yet grasped this fundamental inner truth. The integration of unconscious feelings into conscious awareness represents one of psychology's most delicate processes. It cannot be rushed, forced, or manipulated into existence. Like all genuine psychological growth, it must unfold according to its own natural timeline, with patience, understanding, and respect for the complexity of human emotional development.
Trust what you observe beyond words.
Learn to read the language of the unconscious, to recognize the soul's communications that transcend verbal expression. Most often, the real "I love you" has already been spoken through actions, gestures, and behaviors, even if it hasn't yet been heard by the conscious mind that still fears the vulnerability such acknowledgement would require. The soul knows before the mind accepts, the heart feels before the ego surrenders, and love expresses itself through countless unconscious channels long before it finds the courage to speak its name aloud. When you learn to recognize these deeper communications, you gain access to emotional truths that run far deeper than surface conversations, connecting with the authentic core of human feeling that lies beneath our psychological defenses.